too exposed here, Lola. We need to move. Stella shouted to her best friend and fellow soldier, their voices lost in the chaos of the Sambisa forest. Shots rang out as they fought back against a Boko Haram ambush. "I've got your back," Lola replied, steadying her aim. But before she could fire again, a gunshot echoed from the trees, and Lola crumpled to the ground. "No!" Stella screamed, rushing to her friend's side. Lola lay bleeding, gasping for breath as her life slipped away. Stella held her tightly, but it was too late. As Lola's lifeless body went limp, the world around Stella blurred, fading into darkness. Suddenly, Stella jerked awake in her bedroom, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. It was a nightmare, a haunting memory she could never escape. The morning sunlight filtered through her curtains, but the brightness did nothing to ease the weight on her chest. She sat up slowly, staring at an old photograph in her hands, a younger Lola and Stella, smiling in their military uniforms, both full of life. The photo was a painful reminder of the day she lost her best friend. A knock at the door snapped her out of her thoughts. The door creaked open, and Fatima, her housemaid, stepped in cautiously. "Kim is ready for school, Ma," Fatima said quietly. Stella forced herself out of bed, trying to shake off the nightmare as she followed Fatima to the living room. There, she saw her daughter, Kimberly, heading out the door to catch the school bus. "You're not even going to give me a hug?" Stella asked, attempting to sound gentle, though the tension in her voice was clear. Kim hesitated, then gave her mother a quick, half-hearted hug before rushing out of the house. The distance between them felt vast, a gap that had grown over years of Stella's strictness and emotional absence during Kim's childhood. Outside, the school bus pulled up with a screech, and Kim climbed aboard, waving a silent goodbye to her mother. Meanwhile, across town, Dr. Elizabeth sat in a cozy cafe, enjoying her morning coffee. Her thoughts wandered as she read a message from her husband, once again informing her he wouldn't make it home for dinner. She sighed deeply. As a psychologist, she was used to helping others solve their problems, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her own family was slipping away. The vacation was almost over, and she was eager to get back to her son, David. She quickly dialed his number, making sure he had caught the school bus on time. In another part of the city, Mercy, the bubbly gossip blogger, was glued to her phone, laughing as she posted her latest scoop online. "Becca, the school bus is here," she called out to her daughter from her content room, capturing every moment for her vlog. At the same time, Ahoja Abimbala, a woman of influence and mystery, stood by the window of her lavish home. Once a sugar baby, she had carefully crafted her life after giving birth to her wealthy, late husband's son. Her eyes were calm and calculating as she prepared for another business day. "Akin, the school bus is here. Come downstairs quickly," she said with an air of control. Inside the bus, the children laughed and chattered about the upcoming day, particularly a math test they so much dreaded. Kim sat by the window, lost in thought, wishing she could bridge the emotional gap with her mother. Her daydream was interrupted by Akin, calling her to join the conversation. Just as she was about to respond, Kim noticed something off. The bus was heading in the wrong direction. She frowned and called out to the driver, but he ignored her and kept driving. Back at home, Stella was sipping her coffee when the phone rang. "Hello, good morning, ma'am," the school representative said politely. "I'm calling to inform you that the bus will be a bit late this morning. The driver hasn't arrived yet, so we wanted to let you know." Stella froze. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaky. "The bus just left with the children." "No, ma'am. The driver called to inform us that he'd be late. He hasn't picked up the students yet," the voice on the other end explained calmly. Stella's heart pounded as the phone slipped from her hand, crashing to the floor. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. The day just took a dark turn. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, news broke out about a horrifying incident. The school bus carrying Kim and some other students had been hijacked. Panic rippled through the community like a shockwave, and the school summoned the parents for an emergency meeting. The school became noisy and rowdy as parents arrived at the school with a lot of questions, their hearts raced with anxiety. The principal's grave expression deepened their fears as he explained the situation. "We need your cooperation to help solve the situation at hand," he urged. "The children's lives are at risk." Stella's heart sank as the weight of the situation settled on her. The reality of what was happening was overwhelming, and her mind raced as she tried to figure out her next move. Just then, her phone rang. She excused herself and quickly headed to the restroom to take the call in private. Dr. Elizabeth, noticing Stella's discomfort, followed her quietly, intending to check on her. As Dr. Elizabeth approached the restroom door, she noticed someone leaning against it, listening closely to the conversation inside. Curious and slightly annoyed, she tapped the person on the shoulder. The figure spun around, revealing none other than Mercy, the gossip blogger. "So, this is how you gather your petty information to feed your group?" Dr. Elizabeth said, her tone dripping with disapproval. "My blog, you mean," Mercy corrected sharply, giving Dr. Elizabeth a hard look. Meanwhile, inside the restroom, Stella had made sure she was alone before answering the call. She pressed the phone to her ear, her hand trembling slightly. "I see she looks exactly like you, Stella," said a familiar, cold voice on the other end. Stella's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want, Akindele?" "Leave my daughter out of this," she shouted, her voice breaking with emotion. Mercy and Dr. Elizabeth stood frozen outside, both of them shocked by what they had just overheard. They stayed quiet, leaning in closer to listen. "You shouldn't have walked out on me and my empire. Now look at what you've made me do," Akindele said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Stella's breath caught in her throat, her mind spinning with fear. "What are you talking about?" "I have 2 people I want dead," Akindele continued coldly. "If you can take care of them for me, nothing will happen to those kids. But if you don't..." He paused for effect, his voice chilling as he finished, "Their blood will be on your hands." Before Stella could respond, the call abruptly ended. She stood frozen, staring at her phone, while outside the door, Mercy and Dr. Elizabeth exchanged shocked glances. Neither of them could believe what they had just heard.